Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in this world, and welcome to this learning experience brought to you by AWS and PagerDuty. My name is Cody, and welcome back to Techstrong Learning. We have an exciting workshop ahead, but before we dive into things, I have just a couple of notes I'd like to review. First of all, we are recording today's session. So if you miss any of our discussion, if you'd like to rewatch at a later point, or if you'd like to share with your team, you will be receiving an email shortly after we conclude this session, and that email will include a link to our recording for you to watch as many times as you'd like. If you'd like to engage with us, and I'm sure you will, there are a couple of ways to do so. The first way is the chat tab, and you can find that on the right side of your screen. When you find that chat tab, I'd like you to let us know from where in the world you are joining in. Now, if you have any questions throughout our program, we'd really appreciate if you direct those questions to the Q&A tab, as sending in your questions to that Q&A section just helps us keep track of all of your questions, and we want to make sure not to miss any important ones. They're all important. Additionally, if you jump over to that handout section, you'll see there are a couple of resources there available for you, so feel free to grab those before we close out today. And of course, at the end of our program, I will be giving away two $25 Amazon gift cards, so be sure to stick around until the very end to see if you're one of our lucky winners. So our topic today is part of our AWS Immersion Day, AIOps with PagerDuty and AWS. I'm joined today by Camden Louie, Senior Technical Trainer at PagerDuty, and Hannah Lodis, Senior Technical Trainer at PagerDuty as well. So Hannah and Camden, thank you both so much for joining us today on Techstrong Learning. Camden, do you want to dive us right into things?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Cody, for the wonderful introduction. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. We are really excited to talk to you about this very important, very helpful, just set of options that are available to folks. Now, we always like to, of course, put our own plug out here as we introduce ourselves. And so, Hannah, I just wanted to give you a moment to say hello to all of our lovely audience members.
Hey everybody, my name's Hannah Lodis. As Cody mentioned, I'm a technical trainer here on the PagerDuty University team, and I'm based in San Diego, California. Camden, back to you.
Thank you. And so my name is Camden Louie. I'm a senior technical trainer, as you heard. I'm based in our San Francisco office, so I always like to put out the call. If you are ever in the area, please do let us know. We'd love to host you at the PagerDuty office in San Francisco. Now, we have quite a bit of content that we want to talk about today, and we're going to go through this agenda quickly. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera as well. You really don't need to look at us. We're going to be talking about a good amount of content. So we're going to go through an introduction to PagerDuty AIOps, and then talk about the three specific pillars of that AIOps within our platform. We'll talk specifically about reducing noise, how to automate manual toil with your orchestrations, and how you can improve situational awareness and work smarter with your teams. We will then just take a step back to look at some big picture items, looking at our visibility console and some of our other analytics, our insights reports specifically, before we share some next steps with you, things that you can do to extend your learning and to show off some of the things that you learned today. And so the first thing I wanted to talk through is the PagerDuty Operations Cloud. So the idea behind PagerDuty, for those of you who might be less familiar with the whole platform, is that we are an operations cloud. So we're trying to help solve unplanned, unstructured, time-sensitive, and high-impact work. And so to really drive modern operations, we know that a lot of teams are rethinking their architecture. And the biggest value we really see from PagerDuty comes when you put our tool at the front of your event stream so that our AIOps and some of our automation can all work to take away some of the heavy lifting from the human responders on your teams. And so today we'll talk about how AIOps really helps you to sort through all of that noise. There's so much going on in your various environments. So we want to look at how we can use some event orchestration capabilities so that you're not just responding to hundreds or even thousands of different rules that are or events that are coming through, but we can help you not just create rules, but create some automated actions that go along with those. And then, so we'll talk through some of the configuration of this. We'll also talk conceptually about what we're doing as we concentrate really on that AIOps section of our cloud. Now, if you do have any questions, as Cody mentioned, please feel free to post them in the chat. You can also, of course, put things in the Q&A, and that way we can keep track of all of your questions. We'll go ahead and respond to those throughout our session as we can. Now, before we get too far, I did want to lay out our operational maturity model and how this relates to all of this AIOps conversation. Now, before, in the before times, when PagerDuty first started almost 15 years ago, we were in the midst of things, working with teams, trying to help folks just keep track of the various noise sources to help folks figure out where their systems were having difficulty. Now, we realize that from organization to organization nowadays, and even as we look at teams within a specific organization, there are varying degrees of maturity when it comes to event management. And so over the last few years, we've developed what we call this operational maturity model to help us evaluate where our teams sit at PagerDuty, as well as, of course, with our customers. And so as we look at this operational maturity model from left to right, you start with that manual set of events, the way that folks are able to just, try to keep up with problems as they are being reported, as they are blowing up. And we slowly move to the right as our teams become more proactive, as they become more preventative, so that wherever possible, we can reduce the impact on our team members, on our customers, as we move forward to the right-hand side. And so I wanted to start off with this visual and to ask you where you really think that you and your team members lie on this particular operational maturity model. And again, teams within the same organization can be in very different places. So don't be concerned if you talk to another teammate later and say, oh, I thought I was here in the responsive column, and they say, oh, we really feel like we're being very proactive or preventative. That is very, very common and very much expected. Now, before we get too far into the presentation, I did want to ask a few questions. And the first one is, how do instant notifications make you feel? And this is just a free form question. You're welcome to answer as you wish. You just need to go to slido.com and put in that code PDU, and you'll be able to answer along with the questions that we have in this presentation. So I'm going to give folks just a moment to think about potential words. I see there are some folks who are joining us. Fantastic. How do you feel? How do those instant notifications really make you feel? Yeah. Seeing some very, very common, very relevant words. Nervous. Okay, it looks like a few people feel nervous or overwhelmed. Stressed, absolutely. Chaotic, that's another way of looking at incidents that often happens. All right, give folks just another few seconds to think about that. Grumpy, drowning. Ooh, drowning. That is interesting. Yeah, so there are so many feelings that come up. I don't know about you, but when I get a notification, when I get paged in the middle of the night or when I'm working on something else, that adrenaline is pumping too. And it can be a very, very overwhelming. I'm going to go with the word that seems to have the most votes right now, overwhelming experience. And so as we think about how incident notifications make us feel, that was a huge part of why we wanted to talk about these AIOps capabilities. And then my next question for you is, Have you ever been interrupted by a notification while you were working on an incident? Some folks, I would hope, can say, yes, this has never happened to me. Maybe it occasionally happens to you. And well, I was being a little cheeky when I put this one down, but does the noise ever stop? That is definitely something that has come up when we've had conversations with our team members or with customers and the teams that we're working with. Yeah, a few of you agree with that. Occasionally, I love hearing that. Nobody has said never. I hope that at least one of you out there has never been interrupted by an incident. But if not, that is okay because, oof, oh, good. Okay, at least someone, a couple people here. It's really, really difficult to think about responding to incidents when we are stressed out, when we are overwhelmed, when it feels like a chaotic circumstance. And then to be interrupted by another notification about perhaps a different incident or maybe even the same problem. We really want to avoid that where possible. And so today we wanted to concentrate on three key areas. How do we help teams who are under more and more pressure, who are dealing with a higher volume of noise? How do we help folks work with that inundation of alert noise? We want to see fewer incidents. We're going to identify incidents that really matter. We also are talking to people who are saying we are constantly being just, we're wasting our time. We're constantly having to look at things, take manual steps that are just repeated over and over again. Why do we need to do this? So let's talk about how we can have less effort involved in our response processes and how we can automate some of that manual toil. And then lastly, if you are ever confused, I think I saw chaotic mentioned in that word cloud earlier. So if you're ever confused about where the noise is coming from, what the problem is, what you're supposed to be doing, let's talk a little bit about how you can get to faster resolution by improving your situational awareness. And so, just a couple more kind of things to set the stage. I wanted to just show you this life cycle of an incident model here to help orient folks. So as we're talking about events, noise coming into PagerDuty, that's represented by all of this jumbled mess over here on the left. And then there are various steps that will occur after that event comes into PagerDuty. And that could be things like we're going to see some deduplication and suppression that will occur. We have the ability so PagerDuty has the ability to ingest those various events, those signals, to deduplicate hopefully hundreds or even thousands of those events, just down to the things that we might actually need to take a look at, the human actionable items. We're going to get rid of events that we don't need, and that's great for things like an event storm, but there are those three key pieces that I mentioned earlier, the noise reduction, the event orchestration, and the root cause analysis work that we're going to concentrate on together, because that's where more of our machine learning comes into play, where you can set things up so that they are not going to, so that you are not going to be inundated or snowed in essentially with just overwhelming amounts of noise about the same things. And as much as possible, we're going to try to think about this PagerDuty automation through AIOps as your first virtual responder. So this will help reduce that amount of time to respond to incidents. It's going to be one of the fastest ways to also remove alert fatigue, so that before we even get to the human responders here, we're looking at some machine response. We're using our AIOps capabilities so that really, when we need to loop in our human responders, it's only for those incidents that most need a human, that most need someone to look at this unique, unusual incident. So I wanted to begin with that first pillar, with noise reduction. So when one of your tools sends an event to PagerDuty, the typical set of events would be an alert is created, and then a corresponding incident is triggered in the platform. Without using any noise reduction capabilities, each alert will initially have a corresponding incident, unless there's some deduplication into an existing incident. Now, by consolidating multiple alerts into a single incident using noise reduction capabilities, you'll be able to provide a central incident for your team to respond to and to resolve. So we'll talk a little bit about how you could possibly group alerts to help with that incident handoff between teams, to centralize critical information, and even to reduce some of that notification fatigue. Now, we don't want to alert every single person. And one of the key pieces that we wanted to talk about today is who this capability can really help. So with our NOCs, our SREs, now if we think about a NOC, this is a central place, a central team that is tasked with understanding your day-to-day functioning, the whole organization's technical ecosystem, and being responsible for kicking off incident response and escalating those incidents as needed. Now, previously, many of our NOCs operated on that eyes on glass type of situation where they just had to look and try to catch those problems and dispatch the right teams. That's not always the most effective tactic to take because it can take a long time to discover and route those critical incidents to the right teams. So instead, a lot of NOCs that we're working with are undergoing a modernization of sorts. They're moving more towards that site reliability engineering perspective, where they might serve as the center for operational excellence. They might leverage those, L0, that first level, that automation to help improve the efficiency of the team. And with AIOps capabilities, they are better able to separate some of that signal from the noise to determine what is important and what really needs attention now, today. We also see this noise reduction capability coming into use for major incident management teams. Now, this is, I would say, similar in use perhaps to our NOC teams, where the most important thing is quickly discovering and then triaging any of those major incidents so that you can resolve those incidents, you can close those out. But this, again, requires a very prompt response. You also need the right context to take the next best action. So a major incident management team does not have time to dig through historical documents, to parse event data, to ask around the organization for more information, but instead they need to be working on resolving the incident at hand. So with the AIOps capabilities that we'll talk about, all of those notifications should be actionable alerts. We want data from human actions as well as our machine learning to serve these central and distributed teams. So for both NOCs and MIM teams. Now, lastly, with distributed engineering or DevOps teams, if this is how your organization is currently set up, if you have SMEs, subject matter experts for your service or the services that you own, that you're responsible for, if you're like PagerDuty at all, then you might have that you build it, you own it mentality, which comes with that service ownership. And that really brings the team closer to the customer. It also hopefully connects you more directly to the business goals and to the product, which also means that if something does go wrong, the SMEs are the best people to return service to normal. So with AIOps, our SMEs are only going to be alerted when an incident actually requires their attention. We really want to make sure that alerts are configured so that they are actionable and necessary pieces of information. This is all going to be configured at the service level. And so I mentioned noise reduction. And the key way that we're going to do that is through alert grouping. And we do have 4 different kinds of alert grouping. These are options that are all available at the technical service level: time-based alert grouping, content-based alert grouping, intelligent alert grouping, and we have a new, soon to come out, global set of alert groupings. Now, in a moment, we'll just take a look at how to set up those different alert grouping capabilities in my PagerDuty environment. But first, I just wanted to give you a high level of what these different capabilities look like and how they work. So time-based alert grouping is pretty self-explanatory. For a certain period of time, any alert that comes into PagerDuty from your tools into this service will get grouped together under one single instant. This is really useful if you do anticipate those alert storms on your services. So deduplication and suppression are great. Alert grouping, this time-based alert grouping will help you take that another step further. And so even if you have dozens of alerts being sent to the same endpoint during a particular period of time, we can just automatically group those under one instant. We do find this is a pretty broad strokes tool, broad strokes option, but it is very effective for certain circumstances. Now, content-based alert grouping is going to empower you to choose how alerts are grouped just based on matching particular content within the payload of an incoming event. And so if you are setting this up, you will reference the PagerDuty Common Event Format, or PDCEF fields. And as an example, if an alert you send to PagerDuty has the same component identified within the payload, then you could tell PagerDuty to group all of those like alerts together. Now, we did want to just give you a little peek here and talk about a couple early features that are in early access right now. So very soon, you'll be able to use content-based alert grouping, and you'll have a flexible time window to really dictate how long those alerts should group together. So you can be even more granular about the content-based alert grouping. You can give it a specific time range. We also have global alert grouping, where we're going to be able to reduce noise by grouping alerts across different technical services. So this is a huge improvement for some teams. This is something that we are just introducing and we're really excited about. So as we think about grouping alerts, this just means fewer incidents will be triggered overall, which means fewer interruptions for your responders. And you'll also have much richer context on those incidents that do trigger, with hopefully lower resolution times because you're not being interrupted, like I talked about earlier. And you have just more information being shared and added to the incident as more information comes in through those different alerts. Now, in the initial release of this feature, you'll be able to use that content-based alert grouping with a flexible time window across multiple services. So that's the global aspect. So we'll talk more about that. And in future releases, we're also planning to combine what we call intelligent alert grouping and some rule-based alert grouping for better customization. So do keep an eye out for those features. Those are currently in early access. Now, our last type of alert grouping that I am going to show you today is intelligent alert grouping. So this is going to use our machine learning to group alerts based on alert summary, on time. It's trained by past responder behavior as well. So every action on a service, the way you respond to an incident, the way you group incidents, these are all going to train the underlying algorithm to guarantee that the grouping behavior really reflects your individual service. It's not just using some random set of data. So instead of having to separately configure a bunch of different patterns or try to anticipate some patterns, with intelligent alert grouping, it's really easy to use PagerDuty to observe that real data, the incident history, and to adapt, of course, as your service adapts, as your service evolves with new alerts, and again, looking at how responders react to alerts in certain ways. So there is a lot of information that I'm giving you there. I did want to show you exactly what that looks like here in my demo account as well. So if you are less familiar with PagerDuty, this is our incident dashboard. This is the home page you would see when you first log into the platform. You can see that we currently have a few open incidents that have been triggered, that have been assigned to an individual user. Now, I've been talking about some service level alert grouping. So within the service menu, you can click on Service Directory. This is where all of our technical services live. And so technical services are going to represent a particular area of the business, piece of infrastructure that your individual team would be responsible for. Now I'm going to click into one of my existing technical services, my appliance service here. If I click on the title, I can see the service details page. And what we've been talking about with noise reduction is located just under the settings tab. So whenever you create a new technical service, or if you want to edit an existing technical service, you're able to come into the settings tab. And if you just scroll to the second section, you can see this reduce noise capability. Now it tells me that I currently have intelligent alert grouping on. If I wanted to change that, I could click on the edit icon, and this is where you can see the different noise reduction capabilities that we just talked about. Intelligent alert grouping is located right here. It even gives you the ability to choose a certain period of time. So we talked about how content-based alert grouping will soon have a time window. Intelligent alert grouping already has a time window, and I can say, I want PagerDuty to intelligently group based on the algorithm, based on my past actions, the actions of my teammates. I want PagerDuty to group alerts that come in within a 20-minute period. And you always have the ability to preview what that would look like. That's not something that you have to see, that you have to go through. But it is something, if you don't want to turn on intelligent alert grouping until you have an idea of what it really looks like, you can use this preview button. I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. You also have content-based alert grouping, which I talked about. And this is our existing content-based alert grouping capability where you select a field. You even have recent alerts that have come through this technical service to select from. If I don't want to just guess at what my fields are that are included here, I could select a particular field like the source as an example, and I could say, okay, I want to group based on all of the following fields. I could have the source, I could have multiple fields that I add right here. If I hit save, that would let me save that. I'm going to hit cancel to show you that we also have that time-based alert grouping. So again, these are the capabilities that are currently available to you. Time-based alert grouping just being purely based on a particular window of time. You do have the option to turn off alert grouping if that is necessary for your particular service, but I'm going to go ahead and select that intelligent alert grouping option here. All right, so once you've selected that, you can just click that save button. I am going to, I do want to just show you, let's see if I can do this here. All right, I just wanted to show you what it looks like as we hit a preview button so we can see what that intelligent alert grouping preview looks like. So it's really easy to see how many alerts have come in within the past 45 days. And if I use intelligent alert grouping, how many incidents I could have saved my team if we had chosen to use intelligent alert grouping. So this is a capability that I strongly recommend looking at. It will, again, just save time and energy for everyone. Now, one thing I wanted to show you, just a preview of again, is what it looks like when we're talking about this global alert grouping. Now that you've seen where it's located in the PagerDuty app with our technical services. Now, global alert grouping, this is just an example, some screenshots of what is coming out soon. This is an example of when an alert grouping occurs across multiple services. So I have my Android app service. I also have my app liveness technical service, not just one single technical service. So it could be a cross-collaborative team effort. And so the first indication that an incident has alerts that were grouped from different services via global alert grouping is that we would be able to see this notification. We call this a pill label at the top of our incident when we go into the incident details page, which will indicate that multiple alerts are originating from different services. So a user could refer to the alert section located on the alerts tab of the incident as well if they wanted to display the originating service for each alert. But this will be a quick indicator. So as soon as you click into an incident, into the summary, the title of an incident, you'd be able to see if you were grouping across services. Now, that global alert grouping capability will leverage our content-based alert grouping settings, just like I showed you, to enable that grouping across services to central IT and SRE teams in particular to help reduce some of that noise across related infrastructure. Just reminding you, this is currently in early access, so we don't have UI support for updating a global alert grouping setting. And so just note that this is a preview. These are things that you will be able to see very shortly, but we did want to just give you a quick look at that. Now, within our global alert grouping, there is a capability right below that reduce noise option that I showed you that talks about pausing some transient alerts. So do you ever have flapping alerts? That's something that we've come across many times in our tools where we just don't want to, we don't want to trigger an incident if we think that our tool is going to auto resolve itself, or if, historically we've seen this tool send in a resolution notification right after a triggering notification. Why interrupt the team if we don't have to? Instead, let's go ahead and pause the alert. We do not want to send out those notifications. We don't want to create those incident notifications to interrupt the team member until a certain period has passed. So you will be able to choose from a drop-down menu of how much time you want to pause it for before you actually contact the on-call responders. So again, we want to reduce the number of times you are interrupted so that it's more likely, or you are more confident, that you will only be contacted about those critical time-sensitive incidents that need your personal attention. All right, so those are some of the noise reduction capabilities that I wanted to show you. I did have a couple little quiz questions here to see if this is making sense, if there are things that we can expand on. And so a couple questions. The first one. So Seth here has turned on intelligent alert grouping to allow the machine learning to group alerts together. In order to teach the algorithm, he can do what to alerts into new or existing incidents? What do you think? All right, we have a couple folks who have responded. How do we train the algorithm? All right, looks like most folks have gone with merge. You are absolutely correct. We want to merge those incidents in order to train the algorithm. That's how we can really show that these alerts should be grouped under the same existing incident. Nice work. All right, then our next question. John is experiencing an alert storm. He wants to group alerts together if they're all from the same region. What should he use? All right, we talked about alert storms. There are a couple ways of doing this, but the key part here is that they're all from the same region. All right. Oh, looking good. It looks like all of you are paying attention. Thank you so much. So content-based alert grouping will indeed help us if we can identify that there is a particular field telling us which region it's coming from. It would allow us to then group on that particular field, and it would make this whole experience that much easier as we're getting our response teams together. Thank you, everyone. I'm glad it sounds like some of these things are making sense to you all. Now, with that, I wanted to hand it over to Hannah to talk about the second pillar of AIOps with PagerDuty.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Camden, for giving us that introduction to how we can help reduce some of the noise. I know from somebody who's been on call previously in PagerDuty, when we are experiencing a ton of alert noise, redundant alerts about the same problem, it can start to get pretty exhausting. So using AIOps and that first pillar, noise reduction, is going to greatly help with that problem. Now, what I'm going to talk to you about next is our second pillar of AIOps, which is what we call event orchestration. Now, you can think of event orchestration as a decision engine. It takes all the events and the information that you're sending in from your monitoring tools, determines the next best action for those events in order to determine how they need to be handled within PagerDuty. But before we get too far into a demonstration, let's do one more checkpoint question on Slido. Remember, you can access this at slido.com, putting in the code PDU, or just hovering over that QR code that you see on the screen. So I'm curious, when you are dealing with incidents, what are some of the manual tasks that you usually find yourself performing? Or what are those same tasks that you find yourself completing over and over and over again? Maybe adding a priority, adding a note. So I'd love to hear from you. What's something that you've found yourself doing more than once, this manual task? I see we have some participants typing, restarting a server. Yep, definitely a common one. We do hear folks are restarting servers quite frequently when an incident triggers. Updating priority is a great one. Definitely hear that quite often. We want to make sure that we're prioritizing them appropriately, whether they're P1s, huge issues, or SEV5s or P5s, not a huge issue. Revert last commit, yeah, rolling back any changes we might have made. Definitely. So we're going to take a look at how event orchestration can help you with some of those manual tasks and reducing some of that toil. As I mentioned, it's a decision engine. It's taking all of those signals from the complex tools that you're using, executing logic to perform the next best action. When we're thinking about event orchestration, though, always keep in mind that event orchestration is actions that are happening prior to that incident being triggered. So things we're updating, things we're changing, variables we're using, priority we're adding, all so that responders have enough rich context in order to resolve that incident quickly and efficiently. Now, event orchestration is great for our personas that Camden was talking about earlier. For our NOCs and our SREs, you can ensure that your event data, your alerts, your incidents are all normalized and enriched before any SMEs take over that response. For our major incident management teams, you can think about that manual toil of incident response that you've likely experienced before. Event orchestration is going to take care of all of that, doing much of this automatically and even partnering with PagerDuty incident workflows to take further actions once that incident does in fact trigger. And for our distributed engineering and DevOps teams, you can make sure that your teams are only receiving the incidents that directly pertain to them. You can create orchestrations that work across your entire technical ecosystem. They can be created by a central IT team, yet individual service owning teams can create and apply their own levels of automation for their own services. So it's great for those IT teams to help standardize and scale automation, but also giving DevOps teams the autonomy that they need. Now, you'll hear me talk about two different kinds of event orchestration: global orchestrations and service orchestrations. And we'll start with those global ones. These are the ones that are usually set up by that central IT team. If we're taking a look at this diagram, you'll see that events can be sent into PagerDuty from various monitoring tools. Maybe these are deployment tools, ticketing systems, whatever monitoring tools that your teams are using. These are sent into PagerDuty, and you can almost think of it as kind of throwing it over the fence to PagerDuty and centralizing it in one place. That is what we would consider our global orchestration endpoint. From here, you can set up specific conditions in order to determine which technical service those particular events need to go to. Which teams own those? Are they going to be the best ones to actually resolve those issues? Now, from there, your technical teams that own their particular services can perform additional levels of orchestration and automation before those incidents are triggered. But to start today, we're going to think about that global orchestration endpoint. Typically, you're going to use this if you want to suppress or pause any notifications from being sent to a team. Maybe you want to drop all the data about the incident so it's not available anywhere in PagerDuty. Oftentimes, we find folks are usually using event orchestration as that first step to update the priority, like we saw in that previous question, or add a note to an incident. You can also transform your events to create more meaningful summaries or normalize some fields that your teams can use. This is also great, like I said, for normalizing when it comes to pulling analytics and reports. So let's jump right into the platform. As Camden mentioned, when you initially log into PagerDuty, you're going to land on that incident dashboard. This is where you can see all of the incidents that are currently ongoing. What we want to look at right now, though, and if you're following along with me in your own PagerDuty environment, we'll hover over that automation tab, this time selecting event orchestration from the dropdown. Once we're here, we'll see a variety of event orchestrations that may have been previously set up. These are those different integration keys and routes that are harnessing all of those signals and sending them out to the right teams. For today, we'll go ahead and create a new orchestration just by clicking that blue New Orchestration button. And we'll go ahead and just name this our MIM orchestration for today's example. Once you do so, you'll see a flow chart listed, giving you step-by-step instructions on what exactly needs to be done in order for your orchestration to work properly. We'll start with the Integrations tab. When you initially create a global orchestration, a global orchestration key will be created on your behalf. Now, this is a unique integration key. Much like any technical services set up at the service level, having their own unique integration, global orchestration is very much the same. This is that unique key that tells PagerDuty exactly where your events need to land. Now, the cool thing about this is you can create multiple integration keys for one single orchestration if needed. But for today's purposes, I'm just going to copy this integration key and use it to send in some example events. Now, in order for us to see what's next, this global orchestration tab, we want to start setting up some new rules and conditions to understand how exactly these events are going to be moved and processed. So I have a handy dandy event sender that I'm just going to use for today in order to send some example events into PagerDuty. Now, you'll see I have a variety of different kinds of events that teams might be dealing with. A noisy Splunk event, a noisy Datadog alert, real Datadog problems, or even events with a pretty vague description. So we're going to use these sample events. You can examine the payload here on the screen, and we're just going to go ahead and send those right into this orchestration endpoint. Now, heading back, we can use those recent events in order to start building out our rules. We don't need to guess about, okay, what's going to be included in the summary, or what exactly is the format of the host listed in. We can use this new rule option and check out these recent events right here on the right, making building our orchestration that much easier. Now, on the left, we also see some conditions that we can set up when we want our rules to apply. More often, if you're setting up orchestrations, you're probably going to be using this second option if your events match certain conditions. However, with AIOps, you can let PagerDuty do the extra work for you when it comes to recurring or scheduled rules. You might set up rules on a recurring weekly schedule. Now, this is great if you're working with a support team or you need to differentiate business hours and non-business hours. You might also set up a scheduled date range. This is great for any planned proactive maintenance so that you can reroute things so they don't notify your responders 500 times about an issue. You can also set these up depending upon event frequency. Now, this one's pretty cool, thinking about different thresholds that need to be met. If maybe one event is sent within 5 minutes, it's probably not a huge deal, but if 10 of them are sent within 5 minutes, only then we want to know about them. So you can use these different condition options. But for today, to keep things a little bit simple, we'll take a look at first some of these noisy alerts that are coming into our environment. I see this one is alarm noise from Datadog, and looking at this payload, I see some more alarm noise from Splunk. Now, as that central IT team, I know that these teams probably don't need to be notified about this noise. So at the global level, I might choose to suppress this, making sure it doesn't ever reach their service And they don't need to be woken up in the middle of the night about something that's just noise. So I have the option to click into that key value pairing and populate my conditions, just like you see here. Now you have the power to work with and statements or statements. You can even get a bit more granular with your condition editor, determining if everything is a match or a non-match, or if something simply exists. Lastly, you'll also see an option to toggle over to our advanced condition editor. We lovingly refer to this as Pickle here at PagerDuty, PCL. And this allows you to use the power of Booleans, complex operators in order to write out some more sophisticated conditions if needed. Now, I've targeted the noise. I know that these are the kinds of events that I want to manipulate. And now I get to choose within this global orchestration what exactly I want to do. I can choose to suppress that incident and notifications, which is what we talked about earlier. We don't really need to notify people about these, so we can go ahead and just have that event information available to us in the alerts table. Thinking back to what Camden was showing us earlier with those transient alerts, you might also choose to pause notifications. Give those alerts some time to self-heal, but if a certain time has been passed, then we want to make sure we're sending out notifications. You might also choose to drop an incident and stop processing. Again, this is really good if you have any privacy concerns or security issues, and you need to make sure that specific types of events are not visible anywhere in PagerDuty. So for our use case here, we're going to go ahead and suppress this one. Now you can continue to build out specific rules. They're all going to be evaluated from the top down. So let's say we have this vague description here. We don't really have enough context as to what's going on other than the summary giving us a vague description. This is not helpful, right? Especially if you're being called about this incident and you're hearing that robot voice tell you that the problem is, well, vague. So we can choose to update the description using some variables. We'll go ahead and target this summary. And we'll say anything from new relic, that source, related to this CPU metric. Let's move that information into our summary to make it a little bit more meaningful. So for that, we'll go ahead and do some transformations, this third option from the bottom. And for this use case, you'll want to define some custom variables. We'll first define our component. I like to use a wildcard when I'm using regex so I can capture that whole string, and pull that from my event component. And we'll make one more variable for our source as well, pulling from our event source. Now with these two variables, we can go ahead and update our summary, giving those service owning teams a bit more context as to what's going on. So we'll go ahead and say that this is a new relic issue with CPU usage in this case. Now, as you can see, your opportunities are endless when it comes to how you want to set up your orchestrations. You can add additional ones, or you can even nest your rules in your orchestrations to make further changes. The last thing you'll want to do, though, in order for your global orchestrations to work as expected, is send them off to the right service. Now, this is where we're thinking about those service owning teams. So we'll target this vague description that we just manipulated, and we'll go ahead and point it to the right service. In this case, let's say it's going to go to our training service, for example. So at this point, we've done a little bit of work when it comes to setting up global orchestrations. We've suppressed noise, so service owning teams don't need to be aware of issues that aren't actionable. And we've updated the description of some of those incidents so that by the time they do reach their team, we have a little bit more context as to what's going on. Now, let's see what this looks like. We'll go ahead and resend those events that we just sent previously, and we'll see how those incidents have been updated. So the first thing I see here is I have that new relic issue with a CPU metric. This is that incident that I sent in previously where I went in and updated those different variables. It's sent on over to this team's training service, and they can do with it what they wish. Those noisy alerts, though, those things that weren't really actionable, we find them here in our alerts table. They're suppressed by that event orchestration rule. We can always go in and reference them again, but they're not sending us PagerDuty notifications. So at this point, we've talked quite a bit about that larger global event orchestration where we're pointing things in the right direction to those service owning teams. Now, the last thing we'll want to talk about today when it comes to orchestrations is what those service owning teams can do once those events actually reach their services. And those are going to be found with our service orchestration rules. These are done once those events hit the technical service, where additional nested rules and extractions can take place. You can access these directly from that global orchestration or simply from the service directly. Now, let's go ahead and update some service event rules or service orchestrations for our training service. We'll take some of the same steps here. You'll see that same condition editor where you can pinpoint those exact conditions that need to persist in order for those next set of actions to take place. In this case, we'll just say they always need to be included. And now we can do some more event enrichment. Oftentimes, the very first thing we find folks doing is updating the priority of those incidents. Having that priority and that schema allows us to measure which incidents need to be tackled first versus which can be tackled later on, especially when we're dealing with multiple major incidents. Oftentimes, we find folks will add a note to their incidents as well. This is especially helpful for those troubleshooting teams or somebody who might be brand new to your organization and doesn't quite know all the ins and outs of how to solve incidents like that one. So we might include a link to a wiki or something else that's going to give a bit more context. What we also often see folks doing is some proactive automation. So with the process automation add-on in PagerDuty, you can kick off automations as soon as an incident is detected. So think about it. You aren't going to have to wait for that responder to acknowledge the incident, jump in, and then pull some logs to understand what's going on. Rather, you can dictate and say, hey, if these conditions are met, if these conditions exist in the payload, I want to go ahead and kick off this action. So in this case, I'm going to fetch some diagnostics. As you see, there's multiple actions that you can continue to build out, more else rules evaluated from the top down, or even further nested rules if you'd like to do a bit more precise targeting. So just to see how that service orchestration worked, we'll go ahead and send in those events one more time, and we'll see that updated incident listed here. Now, our incident has that P3 priority that I dictated. Our summary is still giving us a bit more context. And taking a look at the timeline, we're able to see that that automation action was initiated, all before our responder even had the chance to acknowledge. So now once they jump into this incident, they have the help that they need. They can take a look at those logs. They can take a look at that output report in order to see what to do next, greatly decreasing that mean time to resolve. Now, if we're thinking about what a finished event orchestration might look like, I gave you a very, very brief description of what you might see, but just taking a look here, you might see an array of different nested rules and else rules listed within your unique orchestration. Now, in the spirit of transparency, I do want to share one more new and exciting update with you, and that's in regard to some new enhancements that are coming down the line for PagerDuty event orchestration. So soon, you're going to be able to create even more different kinds of variables using event orchestration. These variables are going to allow you to retain historical data, create intelligent automations using that historical context, and store any data you want to use for automation. So this is going to help you with a faster and more targeted incident response in order to have better cross-team collaboration. You can construct really precise event-driven automation that's kicked off based upon that historical context. So a use case to share with you, think about maintenance windows, especially if you're working with large amounts of services. If a tool that you're using is down or you're performing some proactive maintenance on that tool, well, we don't want that tool to just start sending a zillion alerts to PagerDuty and notifying everybody. Rather, we would want to start setting up some maintenance windows. And typically that's been a pretty manual process. You'd want to go into that service, dictate that precise maintenance window for that precise service, that start and end time, and sometimes that might not actually be 100% correct. Maybe the end time is longer than anticipated. You can start to see how this would be a quite manual effort. It would take quite a bit of time and a lot of toil. Now, with variables, this effort disappears. You can create a specific rule that extract maintenance window information from an incoming event payload in PagerDuty. You can store that information, and with that information, suppress any other incoming incidents that might be related to that maintenance. That maintenance window information is contained in the event, so we can tell from that event if the window is occurring or if it's not occurring. Now, if it's true, it's occurring, then everything would be suppressed. But when that variable flips over and it's false, it's not occurring anymore, then incident creation commences. You can also use variables for proactive automation. Any other configuration change that might cause things to fail, well, we can store that event information as a variable, get that early warning, and automatically roll back any changes using process automation. So instead of working through a major incident where dozens of engineers are called on the line, you spend lots and lots of hours, your customers are impacted, you have a huge cost, you can proactively make sure that that doesn't happen using variables and automation. Very cool. If you can't tell already, I'm pretty excited about this new feature to launch. It's in early access right now, but you can expect to see it with AIOps in the next few months. Now, speaking of major incidents, our next pillar of AIOps is in regard to root cause analysis. At this point, you have much better understanding of how you can group your alerts together in order to reduce some of that noise. You have an understanding of how you can use some event-driven automation using orchestrations to take the next best step for your events as they're ingested. But we all know, regardless of how much we prepare, incidents are going to happen, right? Now, luckily, we provide you with some pretty cool ways to get the context and the situational awareness that you need so that you can resolve these incidents much more quickly and efficiently. Many of the things I'm about to show you are just available to you out of the box. They'll appear on your incidents based upon PagerDuty's machine learning algorithm. But let me show you how they work and what some of them mean. Before we do that, let's quickly touch upon our personas here once again. So when we're thinking about root cause analysis or intelligent triage features, it's going to help our NOCs and our SREs have that auto remediation and automated diagnostic information available to further reduce the mean time to resolve their incidents. Our major incident management teams will know immediately what's most important based upon automated detection and triage. All of this information populated by machine learning tells responders where that probable incident origin is, how it's affecting the larger system, if an incident like this has occurred in the past, and if it's related to a particular change. And of course, for our distributed engineering and DevOps teams, They're the SMEs for the services that they own. So these features are going to allow them to quickly identify any anomalous events or things that haven't been seen before and identify changes earlier on. So back into PagerDuty here, let's jump into an incident. We'll take a look at this critical incident on our checkout service, just so you can see how easy it is to gain some of this situational awareness. Now, let's say I'm the responder who's been notified about this incident. I'll be Arthur today. I've gone in and acknowledged this incident. And the very first thing I want to do is get some context. I need to understand exactly what's going on in order to take my next steps. The first thing I'll look at is right up here at the top of my incident. And I see that this is a frequent incident. In fact, this is similar to 97% of incidents over the past 30 days. So it's pretty likely that I have a pretty good understanding of how to resolve this issue. But what should ring some alarm bells for me is if I see that this is either a rare or an anomalous event, meaning it's occurred less than 5% of the time, or it hasn't occurred at all over the past 30 days. Maybe it's something that we haven't seen before. Maybe it's a new issue. And this tells me that I need to start pulling in some additional folks to at least get some eyes on this and get some help. Now, knowing that this is a frequent issue, maybe I now want to understand, okay, if we see this so much, what other past incidents have we experienced on this service? So I can scroll down the page here and take a look at this Past Incidents tab. This provides me with a heat map over the past 6 months of incidents like this one that have occurred on this service. I can see days where there was a higher concentration of incidents like this one and days where there were no incidents like this one. And perhaps I start to identify some patterns. Maybe if you work at a large retail corporation, you start to notice service degradations around holiday shopping time. A pretty good indicator for you for what types of high volume cases are actually triggering those incidents. Now, I understand this is frequent, so I probably have a pretty good understanding of how to resolve this type of issue. But if I don't, maybe I'm a newer responder, I can take a look at these 5 past incidents listed here, click in and view the details, any notes that might have been left about them, or choose to actually just reach out to the person who resolved that issue and get a little bit of help. Now, this gives me information as to what's going on my service, but what about other services across my environment? Well, for that, we'll check out some related incidents. This gives me an idea of if the incident I'm working on is isolated or if it's part of something larger. Seeing what's happening right now across the business helps me understand if this is just a local issue that I can resolve or if I'm impacting others and I need to start mobilizing and collaborating a larger team. Now, there's 2 kinds of related incidents you might see here: dependency-aware incidents and machine learning-based. I will say, when you have your business and technical service dependencies set up appropriately, having this information is going to be a lot easier to see as you'll understand where it's making that impact in the larger web of your service topology. If you dictate that incident, yep, it is in fact related, you can help teach PagerDuty's machine learning algorithm by giving it a thumbs up, and we'll show that those kinds of incidents are related in the future. If not, well, you can give it a thumbs down, and again, we'll learn from that action that you're taking. So at this point, I've gained a lot of different context about this incident. I understand if it's happened before. I can take a look at the past incidents and related incidents. In fact, this information is also available to me in the mobile app too. So if I'm on call responding to this incident using my iPhone, I can see related incidents right there in the palm of my hand. So I have some situational awareness. Now I can start to determine some likely origin points. Is this something that I did? Is this stemming from something else? On the right-hand side, I'm going to see a probable origin. Now, this provides me with some suggestions of incidents or services that are likely to be the origin point of the active incident that I'm investigating. This takes a look at occurrence patterns over the past 6 months. So let's say incident A triggers, followed immediately by incident B, and this pattern has occurred before. A then B, A then B. Well, PagerDuty is going to pick up on those patterns. And if you're working to resolve incident B, we're going to point out that, hey, incident A is likely the reason that you're experiencing incident B. So let's focus our efforts on that initial incident. In this case, this morning on my checkout API. All right, so I have all this additional context. I even have a hint as to where this issue might be coming from, but maybe I need to know a little bit more information. So I have a question for you. Again, this is another interactive question. Go ahead and take a guess. You can join us at slido.com using the code PDU or just by hovering over the QR code that you see there on the screen. Why do you think most incidents tend to trigger? Is it changes in code or infrastructure? Our team needs to transfer ownership of a problem, or our responder just needs to page somebody quickly? We've done some studies here at PagerDuty. We've conducted some surveys. So I'm curious which of these you think is the reason that most incidents trigger. All right, I see a few responses here. Changes in code or infrastructure, a responder needs to page someone. Well, if you're thinking that a responder needs to page someone, not quite. In this case, it is changes. In fact, we found that 85% of incidents are triggered because of changes in code or infrastructure. But it's oftentimes pretty hard to identify which changes are the ones that most likely caused that incident. Now, the faster that we can identify those potential contributing factors, the faster that our incident is going to be resolved. So taking a look at our incident, I've sent in some change events here, and I see the 3 most recent events that have happened based upon 3 factors: time, machine learning, and related services. So now I can quickly take a look at these changes and roll back any changes that might be the reason that this incident triggered. Something to note here, though, is that with these recent changes, these are not actually triggering incidents. These are providing us with contextual information. They're not paging responders, they're not notifying anybody, but rather we just have that information available to us on our incident or that related service. You can check out all change events for your environment by heading to that incident tab and then selecting recent changes from the dropdown. Here, you'll be able to see every single change related to your environment over the past 24 hours. And you can even set up a new change integration if needed, just by selecting that vendor that you're using, the service that you want that change to apply to, and then you'll be presented with a unique web point URL that you can plug into your tool and start sending that event information directly to PagerDuty. You can also view some documentation related to the integration that you chose as well. So let's go back to our incident here. We've gathered a ton of context. We understand if this has occurred before, when it has occurred before, any other incidents that are ongoing across our environment, any changes that might be related to this incident. And let's say it's time for us to go in and start sending out those notifications to our stakeholders. Maybe we figured out the root cause here and we want to go ahead and make sure that our executive and our stakeholders are kept in the loop so that they're not pestering us or jumping on our incident call to get some more details. We can go ahead and send a status update about this issue. And thinking about AI and part of this AIOps workshop, I did want to call out to you some of our generative AI features, which are brand new and available to everyone with the AIOps PagerDuty package. You can generate status updates that are pulled directly from the timeline of your incident, any details left in the notes, which are going to save you time. We can all think about how long it's taken sometimes to craft an update for a major incident. So we can generate that update automatically using PagerDuty AI, read through it. If it's looking good, we'll go ahead and send out that update. Once it's posted, we'll be able to see it listed on that internal status dashboard as well. Now, speaking of generative AI, maybe we've kept our stakeholders in the loop, we've worked together, we've resolved this issue, we can finally go to sleep, right? Well, not quite. We want to make sure we resolve our issues. And once we resolve those incidents, we can also use generative AI to create a postmortem draft on our behalf. So, as you're planning the postmortem follow up actions and the teams that are going to own those postmortems, maybe you're starting to put some dates into the calendar. PagerDuty takes all the first initial steps of generating that postmortem draft for you by, again, pulling in information from your incident timeline, pulling in information from the notes you might have left. So now you have a pretty clear and succinct summary as to what went on during this incident, the impact, any action items that need to be taken next. Of course, you'll be able to go in and edit your postmortems as needed, but this gives you a great starting point for completing those postmortems and starting with those next follow-up steps. So at this point, we've taken a look at our 3 pillars of AIOps. We understand how to reduce the noise on our services. We understand how to use event orchestration to update and enhance our incidents. And further, we understand how to use and leverage some of these root cause analysis features and generative AI features that are just simply available to us right out of the box with very little configuration. Now, to round us out for the rest of the day, I'm going to pass it back over to Camden, who's going to give us a bit more information about the big picture. What's next when it comes to AIOps?
All right, thank you so much, Hannah. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. Lovely. All right, well, thank you so much, Hannah, for guiding us through those 2 very, very important pillars and some of our brand new capabilities coming out. We're really excited about these generative AI capabilities and just thinking about the time and energy it's really going to save for so many of us. So taking a step back, what are some of those big picture pieces that we might want to address? You've learned about these 3 pillars: noise reduction, about automating toil, about how we can look at context and get to that root cause sooner. Now, I wanted to show you just a couple other tools in the platform. First, we're going to take a look at what we call our visibility console. Now, this is something that teams can leverage to better understand data and events. So we've talked about some setup, some items that we can use in order to streamline our responses, to reduce some of the impact on our users. Now, I wanted to show you a couple things. The first thing would be the visibility console. So this is going to provide a single pane of glass. It's going to allow you to better monitor operations in real time and to ensure that your stakeholders, both folks like a NOC or a major incident management team, your technical stakeholders, these are folks who will then have context on this technical environment without having to stop and interrupt the team, ask a responder what's going on, give me an update. And so if you're following along, under the instance menu, you can find the visibility console. And this is where we can see the various types of activity that have been going on within the account. Now, I am using, of course, my demo account. It's not going to have the most exciting data here, but we wanted you to get a sense for what is available. Now, we get a heat map again to show us when we saw a certain number of incidents on particular services. It's very easy to use. We have 8 different modules in here. It's very easy to use these to change the view of them depending on what is important to your teams. But again, we're providing users with that single pane of glass experience so you can more effectively monitor your digital operations in real time. Now we're able to see things like a status dashboard, letting us know how certain areas of the business are being impacted by issues. We're able to see that snapshot of our incidents, what the status is, the priority, who's currently working on it, how long it's been open. And so we're also able to see which technical services are being impacted here. And you can change the order in which you view these different modules. You can change the size of them. You have the ability to add additional modules as are appropriate for your particular use case. So the visibility console is one of those tools that we think allow teams to take a step back, get a higher level view. So it just kind of complements our AIOps capabilities that we've been talking about today. The other tool that I wanted to show you is under our analytics menu here. Under the analytics menu, we have something called our insights report. Now, this is one of our newer reports, and it allows you to get a good, easy visualization of your response efforts. Now, the first tab you see here is incident activity. So you can see those response efforts over time. It includes things like an incident list with various types of metrics. You can change the timeline in which you are viewing this information, but it allows you to more easily consolidate that view, that type of data, to see things like total time to acknowledgement or your responder count, your total time to engage, things like that. Under the service performance report, you have another visualization, again, of incident volume. Now, this can be by service. So we're looking at our volume by different services within our account, our technical service. We do have things like mean time to acknowledge that can be tracked here, that we can sort our tables by so that we can view information across the account, grouped and sorted in that regard. We also have a responder report. I'm going to go through these just at a high level again. This is an additional piece that we thought might be of interest to folks as you're exploring the AIOps features. Responder reports will give you insights again into incident impact, but on specific individual responders. So it includes responder lists with metrics to show you how folks within your account are being impacted by various incidents, and to look at some of their statistics. And then we have our team report. Now, this is going to allow you to group your metrics by team. So if you're using Teams to organize information within your account, this is going to be very helpful to give you a deeper dive view into that particular grouping. You can see things like the number of times folks are interrupted. Again, your mean time to acknowledge, but at the team, through a team lens, your mean time to resolve, and also response effort. So we're looking at the incident duration right here. Last two reports are the escalation policy report, which allows teams to view that complexity of an incident through things like the history of an escalation policy, so you can get a little more of a deeper understanding into how incidents are being handled with these particular escalation policies. Users are just more equipped to make escalation policies and schedule changes if you can understand your escalation policies and the performance of them. And so this will include things like the escalation policy list here, and it has metrics like the mean time to acknowledge, again, mean time to resolve, as well as the number of times you have escalated your incidents, which is something to keep an eye on. And the last report that we thought you might want to take a look at is the business impact report, which provides insights into how much your services are going to cost over time. You can also see a service list down here, so of your various technical services with some of those metrics again, like response effort, uptime percentages, MTTA, MTTR. Now, the beautiful thing about this response cost for services is that you're able to input the appropriate average or estimated cost per hour for your teams, for one of your individual responders. It will default to that $50 cost per hour. But let's say you've calculated it and your team, for the team that you're looking at, it costs about $150 per hour per responder. So you're able to do those calculations quickly here and see what that impact is, what the cost of these incidents are for your services, based on the amount of time you've spent responding to incidents, working on those incidents with your teams. Now, I again am looking at a very particular date range from earlier this year. You can choose which date range you want to look at, including selecting that custom date range. So that was just a quick look at two tools, the Visibility Console and our Analytics Insights Report, which we thought would be very well paired with these AIOps capabilities. Now, the last thing I wanted to do was to ask you one more question before we just open it up for some questions and hopefully answer any questions you might have. We wanted to ask you, using PagerDuty AIOps, I now have a better understanding, or you're excited to use which capabilities. We've talked about noise reduction, orchestration and automating tasks, as well as improving situational awareness. So which of those pillars are you most excited by? You could choose all of them, of course. You can just choose the one that you're most excited to look at. But please feel free to share what is exciting you. It looks like that improving situational awareness capability is top of mind for many folks. And I have to agree, it's really awesome to see how easy it is to tap into those various capabilities that Hannah guided you through. Especially, I'm very excited about those generative AI capabilities. Noise reduction, still very important. Orchestrating those and automating those tasks, also very important. And so, of course, our last couple of items, I just wanted to quickly summarize those three key pillars that we looked at. We talked about how we could have fewer incidents by identifying those incidents that really matter. We can decrease our alert fatigue for responders, improve that quality of life and responder effectiveness. So again, we want to allow responders to concentrate on the things that really matter. That's the first of our three pillars that we're trying to address with AIOps. The second is to expound less effort. So we want to see how we can automate our manual toil. So remember, those orchestrations that Hannah guided you through really allow for thresholding of alerts. It allows you to apply priorities and to add context and runbooks to help responders spend less time researching, doing some of those manual repeated pieces. And lastly, we want to work towards faster resolution by improving our situational awareness. As we can consolidate information, we're able to reduce the amount of time it takes a responder when they're searching for that information, when they're trying to figure out what happened the last time something like this happened. We want to give folks all of that information at their fingertips wherever possible. So with that, we wanted to leave you with a resource that will allow you to continue your learning and also to just show off what you've learned with the PagerDuty's AIOps capabilities. And so there is a PagerDuty University AIOps certification that you will have access to as part of this webinar. And there are 30 questions on the exam. You'll have 45 minutes. We've given you a little bit of information there. Now, the way to access this is by logging in to the premiumpdu.pagerduty.com site. You will then have a special access code, which is PDU AWS, all lowercase, with the number 1. And you will be able to use this access code to create an account and take this AIOps knowledge series if you want to do a little refresher or delve deeper into any of these capabilities we've talked about. And then you can take that certification exam to show what you've learned here. You can, of course, tag us if you post that certification, that badge on LinkedIn. Hannah and I are very excited when we see folks get that certification, get that badge. And so with that, we have some handouts that are in the handout section. And of course, we want to make sure that we're able to answer any questions that you might have lingering. If you do need to drop off, I wanted to say a huge thank you from Hannah and myself, from all of PagerDuty and the PDU team. We're really excited to have this opportunity to have time with you all today, and we want to say thank you for taking the time to join us. Now, if you do have any questions, we'll stick around and hopefully get those answered for you. All right. And thank you, Hannah, for posting the information in the chat for our site and the access code. But we will see if there's anything burning, any burning questions here. Yes, and please do take the survey. Let us know what you thought of this session. And of course, if you have any other questions, you can post them in that survey as well. We do have a number of additional pieces of information, again, in the handouts tab. So if you want to look at how you can calculate the ROI of AIOps, what's really the value that you're getting out of this. There's also a Forrester Wave report that you could take a look at, a CIO pocket guide to event-driven automation, and then how can you really modernize a NOC with some of these SRE best practices that we've talked about? How do we improve the livelihood, the life and lifestyle of our NOC team members? All right. Thank you so much, Cody, for organizing this and hosting us today. It was a pleasure to be here.
Of course, of course. And if we happen to get any last second questions while I'm closing things out, I will stop and we'll tackle that question. So Camden and Hannah, thank you so much for joining us today on Techstrong Learning. It was such a pleasure speaking with you before and to learn all the intricacies of how these platforms work together. Thank you so much for providing this in-depth demo and workshop. And I definitely, everyone here, keep an eye on the bottom of that chat. Grab that access code and that link now because you don't want to miss out on that. Just a reminder that we have been recording our session today. Following this, you'll receive a copy of the recording via email, or you can also find the recording living on the DevOps website. That's devops.com/webinars. And be sure to look in the on-demand section. We have two winners for our $25 Amazon gift card drawing, and they are Barb A and Mick M. So to the both of you, keep an eye out for an email from myself. I'll be sending it out here shortly and distributing these gift cards to you. If you don't happen to see that email, check your spam folder because there might just be a $25 gift card waiting in there. I would like to thank AWS and PagerDuty for sponsoring this workshop today. And before I officially close out, one more question check. I think we are all good to go, everyone. So Camden and Hannah, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Cody.
Thanks for having us today. And thanks, folks, for your attention. We really appreciate it.
Of course, and we do hope to see everyone back at a future Techstrong Learning experience. With 3 minutes to spare, you may all disconnect. Thanks again, everyone.